Hey guys, so I'm here from my backyard garden again. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of a humbling video. Now, I grow a lot of cool things in my garden, and when I show my family and friends all the things I grow, they always praise my green thumb. But one of the things I don't really talk about much, or really talk about ever, are all the failures that I've had in my garden. I've accidentally killed a lot of plants. I've had plants die on me for unknown reasons. And I've had pest infestation so bad that I just had to get rid of the plants. But the important thing with failures in the garden, just like failures in any other parts of life, is to learn from it, not make that mistake again, and to keep growing. No pun intended. Now, I've had a number of plants die on me after they produced about a year of a good crop. Most notably my papaya tree, my fig tree, my passion fruit vine, and my miracle fruit bush. Those will not be on this list. The plants on this list that I'll be talking about either produce no fruit or very little fruit. So without further ado, let's look back at some of my epic failures. I'm going to start with the first tree that I ever bought for my backyard. A real sob story that digs deep in my heart, my lychee tree.
I bought my lychee tree right after I moved into my house in June 2018. At that point, I had basically no knowledge of what fruits grow well in Florida, and I had no plan of what I'd end up doing with my yard. But I'd had lychees before and knew I enjoyed them, so I went to a nursery and bought a tree. The tree established nicely and grew well, but little did I know that lychees are not a reliable bloomer, they grow into massive trees, and they are riddled with pests. The tree actually flowered the following spring in 2019, but didn't set fruit. After that, it was all downhill for the next 3 years. I was constantly battling the devilish Sri Lankan weevil that just loves eating lychee leaves, which caused significant damage and which also spread to other trees in my yard. After 2019, the unreliable tree never even flowered again. Finally, in December 2022, 4.5 years after planting, the coup de grace showed up in the form of the Lychee Erinos mite. This microscopic mite causes distinct deformities in the leaves and will more than likely eventually kill the tree unless you cut it down to the trunk and baby it with pesticides for the rest of the tree's life. Based on all that, I decided it was time to say goodbye to the oldest tree in my yard, so I cut it down and replaced it with 2 more reliable dwarf trees, a Pickering mango and a Macaque sapodilla.
So my lychee tree was replaced by this mango and sapodilla, which are both doing really well right now. My next epic failure happened right next to this, right over here, where I had my Barbados cherry tree.
This story starts when I was strolling through the garden section of Home Depot in August 2018, so not long after I got the lychee tree, and I saw a cherry tree for sale. I thought, oh cool, I love cherries, so I bought it and stuffed it in the back of my Nissan Altima. If you actually enjoy eating Barbados cherries, then this tree is a great choice for you, since it gave me fruit almost right away with pretty flowers. The unfortunate thing I didn't know until I tasted the fruit was these were no Bing cherries that you're used to eating from the grocery store. These so-called cherries are almost all inedible seeds, and the flavor of the little flesh there is quite bland unless you let it get super ripe on the tree, at which point the squirrels and birds will likely get to it first. I ended up bagging these individual cherries for a bit. After that first crop, it did flower some more but barely even set any fruit. I kept it until January 2020 when I decided to pull the old George Washington and cut down my cherry tree.
I actually replaced the cherry tree first with a fig tree, which quickly succumbed to root knot nematodes. And then I replaced that with this Mame sapote tree, which is doing really well. For my next epic failure, I'm going to move over to the corner of my yard. And this story is a little different than the rest of them. This is easily the most embarrassing story that I'm going to tell you. And it all started with this tree stump down over there.
When I moved into my house, it had this huge black olive tree, which is not related to edible olives. I hated it ever since I moved in. It dropped its leaves into my pool, its tons of inedible fruit stained my patio, and worst of all, it took up too much wasteful room where I could be growing exotic fruit. So me being me, I tried gradually cutting it down over time, branch by branch. I got some nice big branches down using my little battery-powered pole saw, but then one evening, I guess I went in at a wrong angle, and the saw got stuck under the weight of the branch. I started freaking out because this picture was taken at 5:57 p.m. and it was going to be getting dark soon, and I couldn't leave this saw just hanging there, but I had no other way to get it down. I decided to drive to Lowe's and buy another pole saw. Now this next picture might be as fail as a picture gets. Yep, that's right, I got the second saw stuck as well. This picture was taken at 7:28 p.m., so I quickly scrambled back to Lowe's to buy yet a third pole saw. This time I went in at the right angle and cut the branch down, and down came the other two saws. I did end up returning the last pole saw and still used the second one, so no harm done. After that ordeal, I bit the bullet and hired the pros to cut down the whole tree. But the anxiety of having two pole saws stuck in that tree still haunts me to this day.
So right next to where my black olive tree was, I actually tried growing an avocado tree right here, which is my next epic failure story.
So avocados do grow well in South Florida, and I decided that I wanted one. So I bought this Kumquat avocado tree in December 2020. I bought a lot of trees from Everglades Farm, which shipped them to me, and this was the only one that did not look great, as the trunk was clearly bent. Regardless, I planted it and tried straightening it out. But everything that could go wrong did go wrong with this tree. It did put out some new growth, but none of it ever lasted long. All the new branches just kept dying back. I ended up cutting off the main leader branch after it looked like it was dying, and then the tree put out what seemed to be a new leader off to the side. It started to look better, but then some pests, I never got visual confirmation, but I suspect they were snails, got a hold of the leaves and did some major damage. This leaf damage occurred in April 2022, so a year and a half after getting the tree, and you can see how small it still was. At that point, I decided to just dig it out and put it in a pot to see if I could nurse it back to life. What I found after digging it up is what I blame for all the problems. My damn privacy hedges are ficus, which produce terribly invasive roots that are like ropes just under the surface of my lawn. The ficus root totally entangled the avocado root ball, and I believe it was strangling it. I couldn't save the tree in the pot, but I learned my lesson and put a root blocker around all my trees now, as you can see here with the sapodilla tree. While I love avocados, they aren't quite the exotic fruit that I want growing, so I don't plan on replacing it for now.
In the place of my avocado, I now have my soursop tree, which is doing really nice and a good replacement. My next epic failure happened up in the front of my yard, where I tried growing a Mineola Tangelo tree.
This story is similar to the Barbados cherry, as it started with me strolling, not through Home Depot, but Lowe's, in July 2018, and buying the tree as a spur-of-the-moment purchase and stuffing it back into my Altima. Everything was looking good until I noticed this weird white residue on the leaves. After a little research, I discovered that this white residue was the result of an insect called the Asian citrus psyllid. This tiny insect is the vector of the dreaded bacteria that results in citrus greening disease, which has decimated the Florida citrus industry. There is no cure, and once infected, trees show yellowing of leaves and green bitter fruits until the tree finally dies. The presence of the insect doesn't directly mean the tree is infected, so I gave it a shot, using heavy doses of pesticides trying to keep the insects away. In January 2022, the tree did produce one fruit. It fell off, mostly green, and I ate it, and it was actually pretty sweet. I'm not sure if this fruit fell off green because of the disease or if it was just the first fruit on an immature tree. I gave the tree another year. It was struggling the whole time and didn't produce any more fruit. In May 2022, I bit the bullet and chopped it down. Interestingly, after I dug out the root ball, I found even more ficus roots which came through this hole in the concrete wall about 20 feet from the hedges. One of these days, I hope to get rid of all these damn ficus hedges.
So my Tangelo tree is now replaced with a much better producing Kumquat tree, which is right now producing a nice crop, which should be ready this spring, so stick around for that video. My next epic failure is another citrus tree that I tried growing a few years ago, a Kumquat tree.
The Kumquat was yet another spur-of-the-moment purchase from Lowe's in February 2019. Brought home in the back of my Altima, but this time I didn't need to stuff it in. I kept it in a pot and it grew nicely and fast and quickly flowered and produced a first crop of fruit. I had never actually tried kumquats, but I read that they had sweet skin and sour pulp, but sweet enough to eat on their own. I picked the first orange fruit already in May 2019, but it was not sweet at all. It was sour like a lemon. Maybe I was too eager, but I picked the rest while still green with the plan of candying them. They actually turned out quite tasty like this, and I did intend to keep the tree, but I made a poor decision and tried planting it in the ground. I don't know why, but it quickly went downhill and died. And that's the end of the kumquat story.
All right, so this next story ends with a crazy pest infestation. Check what happened to my mulberry tree.
I bought this little mulberry tree from Amazon in October 2018. My plan was to keep it in a pot, and it grew super fast and was looking great and healthy for a while. After only a year and a half, it actually started producing fruit, which were nice and tasty, but then I noticed some white spots forming on the branches. I didn't even realize what it was for a while. I thought it was just growth of the bark, but then I looked closer and figured out that it was actually scale insects. I tried scraping them off and spraying it with insecticide, but these scales were just too overwhelming and quickly completely swarmed over the entire tree. Take a look at these pictures. Ever see such a crazy scale infestation? I didn't have the effort to control them, and they quickly led to the significant decline of the tree, and at that point there was nothing for me to do but just get rid of it.
So the mulberry tree actually did produce a nice crop really quickly on a small tree. So if you like mulberries and you're willing to try to keep those scale in check, a mulberry tree could be a good choice for South Florida gardening. My last two short stories are little experiments that I tried doing, not quite big trees, but they both ended pretty badly. So check out what happened with my Brussels sprouts and my raspberries.
So the first was when I tried growing Brussels sprouts. I got these in October 2018 with the intention of growing them over the winter, which I believe was the correct move. They actually quickly thrived, and by February 2019 they were growing little sprouts. However, by March, the plants got a terrible infestation of aphids, an infestation I've seen only rivaled by the mulberry scale. Based on the level of infestation, I just took the loss and got rid of them. And the final failure was a raspberry plant that I tried growing in January 2019. I did correctly get the Mysore variety, which is a black fruit and the only kind that actually grows in Florida. The plant did grow well and it produced a few small tasty fruit, but the fast-growing long canes were covered in razor-sharp thorns, which basically made dealing with the plant impossible without significant injury to myself. The small number of fruit weren't worth the hassle of dealing with the literal pain, and I decided to get rid of it about a year later. Needless to say, cutting it down was not fun.
All right, wow, it feels really good to get this all off my chest. The thing is, pretty much all of these failures happened in the first couple years of planting my garden, and they were all pretty much a result of just not doing enough research, just buying stuff spur of the moment, and not knowing what are good things to grow in my yard. I've learned from all these mistakes to do more research and think about what will be best for my backyard garden. While it was disappointing that I didn't get the crops that I was hoping for from some of these plants, I don't regret anything I've done, as it's all a learning experience and the garden is never complete. Thanks so much for watching. If you're up for it, I would love to hear about some of your epic failures in the comments below. All right, hope to catch you next time.